It was a biting cold night in 1914. Soldiers were stuck in their frozen trenches, ready to kill each other. The air was thick with the silence of death, but something happened that night which changed history. Suddenly, a sound came from the German trenches. It wasn't the sound of a gunshot. It was the carol, Silent Night, floating across no man's land, and then, it was as if time stood still, the ice of hatred began to melt, and the silence of death transformed into an echo of hope. Before anyone could fire at the enemy, the world witnessed an astonishing sight. From the edge of the German trenches a hand rose high, holding not a rifle, but a glowing lantern. A German soldier, disregarding his own life, began to walk with silent steps toward those barren patches of death known as no man's land. On his lips was that same melody, and in his hands a silent plea for peace. The miracle began with that single brave step. Seeing that lone German soldier standing unarmed, a young British soldier climbed over the mud-slicked parapet to meet the enemy. For a moment, there was a breathtaking silence, and then, one by one, men from both sides, fathers, brothers, and sons, began to climb out of their muddy graves of despair. In the middle of no man's land, where only bullets had traveled before, hands were now extended in friendship. They shook hands with the enemy and found only fellow humans, shivering in the same cold, longing for the same home. Soon, no man's land was no longer a wasteland of death, but a bridge of brotherhood. Hands that had gripped rifles just hours before were now extended in warm handshakes. They shared what little they had. German sausages were swapped for British bully beef, and stale biscuits were exchanged for sweet plum puddings. They traded uniform buttons as souvenirs and showed each other crumpled photographs of wives and children waiting in distant lands. They even played football on the frozen ground. Since they didn't have a real ball, they used bundles of rags and empty tin cans as a makeshift ball. For a few sacred hours, the borders of empires vanished. There were no Germans, no British, only men playing in the snow, reclaiming their lost innocence. This was the day when humanity truly conquered war. Tragically, the next morning, when the high-ranking officers found out, they became very angry and ordered the war to be resumed immediately. In some places, soldiers fired shots in the air so as not to harm their new friends, but slowly the bitterness of war ended everything again. But history reminds us that deep down, ordinary people only want peace.